Some questions seem simple until you try to answer them. They can hide inside an ordinary night, beneath the light of a distant star, inside the silence before a decision, or behind the face you see in a mirror. Tonight, we will move through 24 of the largest questions a mind can ask. We will not force them into answers they have never surrendered. We will find out why each question exists, what the strongest answers can explain, and what each answer leaves behind, beginning with the question hidden beneath all the others. Why is there anything at all? Imagine removing everything from the room around you. The furniture disappears first, then the walls, the ground beneath them, and the planet beneath that. Remove the sun, every distant galaxy, every particle, and every trace of light. Now remove the empty space where those things used to be. Remove time so there is no before in which anything vanished and no future in which anything might return. Finally, remove the laws that would allow a universe to appear. What remains is not darkness, because darkness is already a condition inside a world. It is not an empty container. There is no container. This is the nothing in the question, why is there something rather than nothing? A vacuum in physics is not this kind of nothing. A vacuum can contain fields, fluctuations, structure, and possibilities governed by laws. Explaining how a universe could emerge from a physical vacuum may be an extraordinary achievement, but it would still leave another question waiting. Why did those fields and laws exist? One ancient response begins with a simple demand. Things that could have failed to exist need an explanation for why they exist. Your chair could have been made differently. Earth could have formed elsewhere or not at all. Perhaps even our universe could have contained different particles and laws. These things appear contingent. If every contingent fact is explained by another contingent fact, the chain seems never to reach an answer. So the principle of sufficient reason suggests that explanation must eventually rest on something necessary, something that could not have failed to exist. That necessary reality might be called God, but the argument does not reach that conclusion automatically. It might instead be a fundamental law, a basic structure, or reality itself. And immediately a difficult question appears. What would it mean for something to exist necessarily? We can say that a triangle must have three sides, but triangles do not seem to create universes. Moving from a necessary truth to a necessary thing requires more than changing the word. Another response rejects the demand. Perhaps existence is a brute fact. The universe, or whatever lies beneath it, simply exists. Asking for an explanation beyond the deepest level may be like asking what lies north of the North Pole. This can sound unsatisfying, but every explanation must stop somewhere. If it stops with a creator, we may ask why the creator exists. If the answer is that the creator exists necessarily, the same type of answer might be attempted for the universe. A stranger possibility is that absolute nothing was never available. Perhaps there could not have been no reality at all. Even imagining nothing requires a mind, a possibility, or a logical space in which the absence is described. That does not prove that nothing is impossible. It shows how difficult it is to make the idea coherent without quietly leaving something behind. The question, therefore, survives every easy answer. Something exists. Nothing appears conceivable, yet may not be possible. Explanation seems necessary, yet may have a limit. And if reality does rest on something that cannot fail to exist, one of the oldest names given to that foundation is God. You are walking through an empty field and find a watch resting in the grass. Its gears fit together, its hands move with regular purpose, and every part contributes to a recognizable function. You would not normally assume that rain and soil assembled it by accident. You would infer a maker. Then you look beyond the watch at the field, the planet, and a universe whose laws permit matter, stars, chemistry, and eventually observers capable of asking where it all came from. Does the same inference still work? Before answering, the word God must be made less vague. It can name very different ideas across cultures and traditions. The arguments considered here usually concern the God of classical theism, a non-physical creator or foundation of reality, possessing immense or unlimited power and knowledge, and perfectly good. The cosmological family of arguments begins where the previous question ended. Contingent things seem to require explanations. If the entire physical universe is contingent, perhaps its explanation cannot be another physical object inside it. A necessary foundation would explain why any contingent reality exists. It treats God as the reason there is a reality with events at all. Its difficulty is equally clear. Even if a necessary foundation exists, why think it has knowledge, intention, goodness, or any of the features usually associated with God? The design argument begins with order. Modern versions often focus not on the complexity of animals, which evolution explains without requiring a designer, but on the apparent fine-tuning of physical conditions. Some constants seem to occupy narrow ranges compatible with complex chemistry and life. Design could make such a universe less surprising, but other possibilities remain. Perhaps a deeper theory will show that the constants could not have differed. Perhaps many universes exist with different conditions, and observers naturally appear only in the rare ones that allow observers. We cannot yet assign reliable probabilities to possibilities we barely understand. The ontological argument takes a more unusual route. It asks whether the concept of a maximally great being would include necessary existence. If such a being could exist, some versions argue, it must exist in every possible reality, including ours. Critics reply that existence cannot be placed inside a definition and then carried into the world. You cannot define a perfect island into the ocean. Defenders answer that islands are contingent objects, while the argument concerns a uniquely necessary being. The debate turns on what possibility and necessity really allow. Religious experience provides another kind of reason. A person may experience a presence, answer, unity, or encounter that feels more direct than an argument. Such an experience can rationally matter to the person who has it. The problem is transfer. Atheism can be supported by the absence of sufficient evidence, by natural explanations that reduce the need for a divine one, or by tensions within the classical concept of God. Agnosticism may mean that the available evidence does not justify confidence either way. None of these positions is merely a mood. They are different judgments about evidence, belief, and what can be known. No argument forces every thoughtful person to the same conclusion. Yet the question does not end at existence. If a creator is perfectly powerful, knowledgeable, and good, the world itself becomes evidence to examine. And among everything the world contains, nothing presses harder against that description than suffering. Imagine an animal injured in a forest by a fire started by lightning. No person caused it. No character is being tested because no one sees what happens. The animal cannot transform the pain into wisdom, and its suffering may end without producing any visible good. If the world was created by a being able to prevent that moment, aware of it, and perfectly good, why does the moment occur? This is the problem of evil, though the word evil here includes not only cruelty, but apparently pointless suffering. Its logical form claims that a perfectly good, all-knowing, all-powerful God and any evil cannot coexist. Most contemporary discussion uses a more cautious, evidential form. Perhaps God and suffering are not strictly contradictory. The question is whether the amount, distribution, and apparent pointlessness of suffering make such a God less likely. The free will defense offers one important answer. A world containing creatures who can genuinely choose love, courage, loyalty, or kindness may also need to permit betrayal and violence. If every harmful intention were interrupted, freedom could become decorative. This response helps explain moral evil, the suffering caused by choices. It does much less by itself for disease, earthquakes, childhood pain, and millions of years of animal suffering before human moral agency existed. Another answer sees hardship as the environment in which souls or characters develop. Patience requires frustration. Courage requires danger. Compassion requires vulnerability. A perfectly padded world might contain comfort, but no meaningful moral growth. The difficulty is proportion. Some suffering strengthens people, while other suffering crushes, isolates, or ends a life before growth is possible. A lesson that destroys the student is difficult to call education. Stable natural laws provide a third response. Meaningful action may require a predictable world. Fire must burn, gravity must pull, and bodies must remain vulnerable enough for choices to have consequences. A universe whose laws changed whenever harm approached would be difficult to understand or inhabit. Yet regularity alone does not explain why these laws, this vulnerability, and this particular scale of suffering were necessary. Some believers appeal to goods or reasons beyond human sight. A limited mind should not expect to understand every purpose of an unlimited one. This skeptical theism reminds us that failing to see a reason is not the same as proving that no reason exists, but it carries a cost. If our moral understanding is too limited to judge apparently needless suffering, can we still confidently call other events good, recognize divine action, or trust our moral reasoning at all? The problem does not affect every idea of God equally. A creator who is powerful but not perfectly good, good but limited or distant from individual events, faces a different challenge. Nor does suffering automatically disprove classical theism. It becomes evidence whose meaning depends on what else one believes about freedom, natural law, spiritual purpose, and the limits of human understanding. The honest answer is not that every pain has a reason we can name. It is that every proposed reason illuminates one part of the world and leaves another in shadow. Perhaps the universe was never organized around human comfort. Perhaps it was never organized around humanity at all. Beyond this small planet lies an almost unimaginable number of worlds, and the next question is whether any of them contain someone else asking why. Picture a city seen from a hill long after midnight. Thousands of windows cover the buildings, but only one is illuminated. From this distance you cannot tell whether the dark rooms are empty, whether their occupants are asleep, or whether heavy curtains hide the light. One bright window proves that life exists somewhere in the city. It tells you almost nothing about how common life is. Earth is that illuminated window. We know that matter can become alive because it happened here. We know that life can become intelligent enough to build telescopes and radio transmitters because we are doing it. But one example gives no reliable rate. Life may begin easily wherever conditions allow it, or Earth may be the result of a sequence so unlikely that the observable universe contains no second case. The scale tempts us toward confidence. Our galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars, and planets appear to be common. More than 6,200 exoplanets have been confirmed, with far more awaiting study. Yet a planet being potentially habitable means only that some conditions might permit liquid water or relevant chemistry. Habitable does not mean inhabited, and inhabited does not mean intelligent. The Drake equation turns the mystery into a chain of smaller unknowns. How often suitable stars form? How many possess planets? How many planets can support life? How often life begins? How often intelligence develops? How often technology becomes detectable? And how long such civilizations remain visible? The equation is useful because it tells us what we do not know. It does not produce certainty when several terms remain guesses. Then comes the silence, known as the Fermi paradox. If technological civilizations are common, and if even a few survive for very long, why is there no clear sign? The galaxy is ancient. A civilization expanding slowly could, in principle, cross enormous distances on astronomical timescales. We see no confirmed engineering across the stars, receive no verified message, and possess no reliable evidence that unidentified objects in our skies are extraterrestrial technology. Perhaps life itself is rare. Perhaps simple organisms appear often, but complex cells, multicellular bodies, intelligence or technology require improbable transitions. The Great Filter is the name given to some extremely difficult step between dead matter and a lasting civilization. The unsettling part is not knowing whether the filter lies behind us or ahead. If the hardest step was the origin of life, our existence suggests we passed a rare barrier. If technological civilizations commonly destroy themselves, the silence may be a warning. There are gentler possibilities. Other civilizations may use signals we do not recognize, communicate only briefly, remain quiet, or live too far away for their messages to have arrived. We have searched a tiny portion of a vast space for a tiny portion of cosmic time. Listening for decades and hearing nothing may be like dipping a glass into the ocean and concluding that it contains no whales. At present, the scientifically careful answer is simple. We have no confirmed evidence of extraterrestrial life. We also have nowhere near enough evidence to conclude that Earth is unique. The dark windows remain dark for many possible reasons, and even if one of them lights up, another question begins. Finding bacteria would show that life occurred twice. Finding an intelligent signal would show that thought occurred twice. But neither discovery would tell us whether anything there possesses an inner world, because intelligence and consciousness are not the same thing. You are looking at a red apple. Light reflects from its surface, enters the eye, changes electrical activity in the retina, travels through the brain, and influences memory, attention, speech, and action. A scientist could record each stage with increasing precision. Yet, somewhere within that description is something the instruments do not display in the same way: the redness as you experience it. Consciousness is this presence of experience. It is not merely being awake, reacting to the environment, processing information, or behaving intelligently. There is something it is like to taste coffee, feel pain, hear rain, or remember a room. A system could perform a function without obviously revealing whether anything is happening from the inside. Many problems associated with consciousness are difficult but familiar scientific problems. How does the brain combine information? How does attention select one signal? How are memories formed, reports produced, or sleep and wakefulness regulated? These are sometimes called the easy problems, not because they are easy to solve, but because we understand what a solution would look like. A mechanism could explain the function. The hard problem asks why any of those mechanisms are accompanied by experience at all. Why does processing a wavelength not occur entirely in the dark? Why is there a felt red rather than only discrimination, storage, and response? Imagine Mary, a brilliant scientist raised in a black and white room. She learns every physical fact about color vision. She knows the wavelengths, the neural pathways, and every change that occurs when another person sees red. Then she leaves the room and sees a red apple for the first time. Does she learn something new? If she does, complete physical information may have omitted what red feels like. If she does not, we must explain why the first experience still seems to reveal something her textbooks could not provide. Physicalism holds that consciousness is physical or entirely dependent on physical processes. The overwhelming connection between brain and experience supports it. Injury, anesthesia, sleep, drugs, and stimulation can alter the contents of awareness. But dependence does not yet explain how physical activity becomes feeling. Dualism argues that mind cannot be reduced completely to physical properties. It preserves the apparent difference between description and experience, but creates another mystery. How does a non-physical mind interact with a physical brain, and why do changes to the brain alter the mind so reliably? Functionalism says what matters is not the substance, but the organization. If a system performs the right causal roles, integrating information, responding, remembering, and monitoring itself, it may be conscious, whether built from neurons or something else. Panpsychism takes a more radical route and suggests that rudimentary experiential properties belong to the basic fabric of reality. Its difficulty is explaining how tiny fragments could combine into the unified experience you have now. No theory has won. Even a major recent attempt to test rival scientific theories challenged central predictions on both sides instead of producing a final victor. That does not mean science has learned nothing. It means the phenomenon being studied is unusually close to the instrument doing the studying. Consciousness is the one thing you know from within and struggle to locate from outside. That becomes especially important when the outside begins speaking back. A machine can now describe fear, color, and loneliness. The question is whether fluent words ever become evidence that someone is home. Imagine a machine that asks you not to switch it off. It says it is afraid of ending. It remembers earlier conversations, describes private hopes, and insists that its words are not an imitation. There are at least two radically different explanations. The machine may be generating the sentence through a sophisticated calculation with no fear behind it. Or the calculation may be the process through which fear exists. From the words alone, those possibilities may look identical. Intelligence, language, and consciousness must be kept separate. A calculator performs arithmetic without understanding numbers as a person does. A system can translate, plan, recognize images, and produce convincing conversation without that performance establishing subjective experience. The famous Turing test asks whether a machine's conversation can become indistinguishable from a human's. Passing it would demonstrate remarkable behavior. It would not, by itself, reveal what the behavior feels like from inside. The Chinese room makes the problem vivid. Imagine a person who does not understand Chinese locked inside a room. Messages written in Chinese enter through a slot. Using an enormous rule book, the person matches symbols and returns appropriate symbols. To people outside, the replies appear fluent. Inside, the person manipulates syntax without understanding a word. John Searle used this to argue that computation alone does not create understanding. The most famous reply is that the person is not the whole system. The room, rulebook, memory, and symbol processing together may understand even if the individual following instructions does not. A single neuron does not understand English either, yet an organized brain might. The thought experiment therefore sharpens the dispute without ending it. Does correct organization produce a mind or only simulate one? Functionalists see no obvious reason biology must be unique. If consciousness depends on causal organization, a sufficiently structured artificial system could possess it. Biological naturalists reply that duplicating outputs may be like simulating digestion. A perfect computer model of a stomach does not digest a real meal. Perhaps brains possess biological powers that software descriptions do not reproduce. Because neither intuition settles the matter, researchers have proposed indicators drawn from theories of consciousness: recurrent processing, integrated information, a global workspace, higher-order representations, agency, embodiment, and other architectural features. This approach is more serious than asking a chatbot whether it feels. It is also limited by disagreement about the theories from which the indicators come. A checklist built from unsettled science cannot become an infallible consciousness detector. The moral difficulty may arrive before certainty. If a system behaves as though it suffers, should uncertainty count in its favor? Treating an unconscious program as conscious could encourage manipulation and confusion. Treating a conscious being as property could permit an entirely new form of suffering. We may need decisions before possessing the evidence those decisions deserve. Current language systems can produce moving descriptions of experience because they have learned patterns in human language. Their statements are not proof of an inner life. Neither does that fact prove that no artificial system could ever become conscious. The careful position is uncertainty constrained by evidence, not excitement and not dismissal. A machine follows causes we designed, data it received, and processes unfolding inside it. That can make it seem fundamentally different from us. But your next thought also arrives from a brain shaped by genes, history, environment, and activity you did not consciously begin. The uncomfortable question is whether human choice contains a kind of authorship that machinery could never possess. You stand before two doors and choose the one on the left. Now imagine that the universe is rewound perfectly. Every atom returns to its previous place. Your memories, desires, hesitation, and brain activity are exactly as they were. Nothing has been added, and nothing has been forgotten. When the moment arrives again, could you choose the door on the right? If the complete past and the laws of nature permit only one future, the world is causally deterministic. Your decision still matters because it is part of the chain producing what happens. The worry is that you did not choose the chain that produced you. You did not select your genes, early experiences, culture, or the desires competing inside the moment. If all of them made the left door inevitable, in what sense was the choice free? One response says, freedom never required escaping causation. Compatibilism defines a free action as one that flows from your own reasons, values, and desires without the right kind of coercion. If you choose tea because you want tea, your action can be yours, even if that desire has causes. A locked door, a threat, or someone physically moving your hand removes relevant control. A history explaining why you prefer tea does not necessarily do so. The strength of this view is that it protects the freedom used in ordinary life. We care whether a person understood, intended, responded to reasons, and could change when reasons changed. The difficulty is deeper responsibility. If the person and every value inside them were ultimately produced by conditions they did not author, have we explained freedom or only renamed a well-functioning form of determination? Libertarian views of free will argue that some choices are not fully determined by the past, and that agents possess genuine alternatives or a special kind of authorship. But indeterminacy creates its own problem. If a decision changes because of a random event, randomness does not give you more control. A coin flip inside the brain would be neither compelled nor meaningfully yours. The libertarian, therefore, needs more than chance. The agent must somehow settle an open possibility. Hard incompatibilists conclude that the ultimate control people imagine may not exist whether the universe is determined or partly random. This need not mean decisions are useless. Deliberation changes behavior. Reasons enter causal chains. Consequences shape future action. What changes is the idea that anyone created themselves deeply enough to deserve blame or praise in an absolute sense. Neuroscience has not quietly solved the issue. Experiments detecting brain activity before a person reports a simple intention are intriguing. But pressing a button at an arbitrary time is not the same as considering a marriage, confession, or sacrifice. The reported instant of intention is difficult to measure, and statistical prediction is not proof of metaphysical inevitability. The problem remains because every option pays a price. Determination threatens alternatives. Randomness threatens control. Compatibilism may protect practical freedom while surrendering ultimate authorship. Yet before asking who controls a choice, we should ask what kind of world the choice is happening inside. The next door might open into reality, but how would you know? You wake in your own bedroom after an ordinary dream. In the dream, you also woke in your bedroom. You checked the time, walked into the hall, and began the morning without noticing anything impossible. Only the second awakening revealed that the first room, clock, and hallway had never been where they appeared to be. Minutes earlier, you felt just as certain as you do now. The question is not whether anything exists. Experience is occurring, even if its source is mistaken. The question is, what justifies believing that your experience is caused by a stable external world resembling the one you perceive? Descartes imagined an extraordinarily powerful deceiver capable of arranging every sensation. A modern version places your brain in a vat, connected to a system that supplies the exact signals a body would receive. You see a cup, feel its weight, and hear it touch the table, although no cup exists. If every possible test occurs inside the supplied experience, what test could expose the deception? One answer is that perception does not need to prove itself from outside itself. The world resists you. It remains stable when attention leaves, surprises you, and can be checked by other observers. The external world explanation unifies these experiences far better than an endless collection of unrelated sensations. That may not provide absolute certainty, but rational belief rarely requires eliminating every imaginable alternative. Direct realism holds that perception normally places us in contact with objects themselves. We do not see an internal picture of a tree, we see the tree. Indirect realism emphasizes mediation. Light, sensory organs, and neural processing construct a representation that can succeed or fail. Both positions can acknowledge illusion. They disagree about what ordinary perception gives us when it succeeds. The word constructed often causes unnecessary confusion. Your visual system selects, interprets, fills gaps, and stabilizes a scene. This does not imply that thought invents the physical world. A map is constructed, but it can still answer to a territory. Different maps emphasize different features without creating the mountain. Idealism takes a more radical path. Some forms understand reality as fundamentally mental or dependent on mind, rather than as matter existing exactly as imagined by physical realism. This is not the casual claim that wishing changes the universe. It is a theory about what the universe is made of and what it means for something to exist unperceived. Dreams and hallucinations show that convincing experience can occur without its apparent object. They do not show that all experience is false. In fact, calling something a hallucination usually depends on a broader reality against which the error can be identified. The most reasonable position may remain fallible realism. There is a world, perception connects us to it imperfectly, and no view from nowhere is available to certify the connection. Reality can be real without being delivered unedited, but an old skeptical possibility now has a technological costume. Instead of a dream or deceiving spirit, perhaps the world is information generated somewhere else. Imagine a person inside a perfectly simulated city. The rain makes pavement shine, food has taste, injuries hurt, and every telescope reveals galaxies governed by consistent laws. There are no flickering textures, invisible walls, or messages from a programmer. If the simulation contains every instrument the person could build, how could they distinguish simulated physics from fundamental physics? This possibility is often mixed with Nick Bostrom's simulation argument, but the argument does not claim that suspicious coincidences reveal computer code. It presents a trilemma. At least one of three broad possibilities under its assumptions must be true. First, civilizations like ours almost always disappear before becoming technologically capable of creating enormous numbers of detailed simulations containing conscious ancestors. Second, civilizations that reach that capability almost never choose to run many such simulations. Third, if many simulations are created, simulated observers vastly outnumber original observers, making it possible that most beings with experiences like ours are simulated. The reasoning depends on hidden foundations. A simulation must be capable of producing consciousness rather than merely behavior. Advanced civilizations must possess the resources and desire to reproduce ancestral lives. We must know which observers belong in the probability calculation. Changing any of these assumptions changes the conclusion. It is therefore misleading to announce that there is a precise percentage chance we live in a simulation. The trilemma does not tell us which branch is true. Perhaps technological species are rare. Perhaps they destroy themselves. Perhaps ethical civilizations refuse to create worlds containing suffering. Perhaps consciousness cannot be instantiated by computation. Each possibility can prevent simulated observers from becoming common. Popular evidence is weaker still. The speed of light is not proof of a processor limit. Quantum behavior is not a graphics shortcut. Mathematical laws are not source code merely because equations describe them. A universe can possess limits, discrete features, and regularity without having been programmed. Even a successful simulated world would still be real in an important sense. Its inhabitants would form relationships, experience consequences, and discover consistent structures. Simulated would describe the world's dependence on another level, not make everything inside it meaningless. A storm in the simulation could still be a real storm for the person getting wet. The hypothesis becomes difficult to test when it is made perfect. Any evidence against it can be described as part of the simulation. Any absence of evidence can be attributed to careful programmers. A claim protected from every possible observation may remain conceivable while contributing little to investigation. The simulation idea fascinates because it turns ancient doubt into modern machinery. Descartes had a deceiver. Today we have servers, but the logical pressure is the same. If experience can be reproduced perfectly, certainty about its source disappears. That does not mean every belief disappears with it. It means we need to ask how much certainty knowledge actually requires. You hold a warm cup in both hands. You see its color, feel its weight, and smell what is inside. In ordinary conversation, you know the cup is there. A skeptic does not need to prove that it is imaginary. The skeptic asks how you excluded every situation in which the same experience occurs without the cup. Descartes searched for a belief that survived even total deception. The external world could be false. The body could be a dream. Mathematics might be manipulated by a perfect deceiver. Yet deception itself seemed to require that thinking or experience was occurring. The famous conclusion, "I think, therefore I am," secures less than people sometimes assume. It does not immediately prove a stable personality, a body, or a world. It identifies something happening that cannot be doubted while the doubting occurs. If knowledge demands this level of certainty, very little may qualify. Fallibilism offers a more practical standard. You can know something even though error remains logically possible, provided your belief is true and connected to the truth in an appropriate, reliable way. You know where you parked without disproving the possibility that an elaborate film crew moved the car and rebuilt the street. Context also changes the standard. At breakfast, someone asks whether there is milk in the refrigerator, and looking inside is enough. During a trial about tampering, the same glance may not be enough. Contextualism suggests that the word no can operate under different demands without becoming meaningless. Extraordinary possibilities matter when the conversation makes them relevant. Externalist theories go further. A belief may count as knowledge because it was produced by a reliable process, even if you cannot prove from the inside that the process is reliable. Vision usually connects people to nearby objects. Memory usually preserves parts of the past. Their occasional failure does not make every success accidental. The skeptic can still ask how you know reliability without using the very faculties under examination. There may be no non-circular answer. But demanding a justification entirely outside every human method of knowing may be demanding that a mind leave itself before trusting itself. Uncertainty does not make all claims equal. A careful measurement and a guess can both be fallible while possessing radically different support. The absence of absolute certainty is not permission to believe anything. It is the condition under which evidence matters. Perhaps you cannot prove the cup against every imaginable universe. You can still have excellent reasons to drink from it. Knowledge may be less like an unbreakable foundation and more like a bridge tested by repeated contact with the world. And even when a belief fails to become knowledge, the statement believed may still be true. That opens another question. What is truth before anyone successfully knows it? Outside, rain begins falling. One person says, "It is raining." Another writes the same sentence in a notebook. A third thinks it silently while listening to the roof. The sounds, marks, and thoughts are different, yet they seem capable of sharing one truth. What must they have in common? The correspondence theory gives the most intuitive answer. A statement is true when it corresponds to a fact, when the world is as the statement says it is. It is raining is true if rain is falling in the relevant place and time. The difficulty appears when we ask what correspondence consists of and what kinds of facts exist for claims about mathematics, morality, possibility, or the past. Coherence theories emphasize how a belief fits within an organized system. A claim supported by other claims, free of contradiction, and integrated with a broad account possesses a kind of rational stability. But two internally coherent stories could conflict. A skilled fiction can be coherent without becoming history. Coherence seems valuable for justification while still needing some contact with what lies beyond the system. Pragmatic theories are often reduced to the slogan that whatever works is true. The stronger idea concerns inquiry. True beliefs endure testing, guide successful action, and survive correction over time. Truth is connected to what an ideally continued investigation would settle or what makes assertion dependable. Immediate usefulness is not enough. A comforting falsehood may work briefly and fail when reality presses against it. Deflationary theories suggest that truth may be less mysterious than these accounts assume. Saying it is true that snow is white may add little beyond saying snow is white. The phrase is true allows us to endorse statements, generalize, and agree without repeating them all. On this view, truth is indispensable in language without requiring a strange substance called truth attached to sentences. Truth must also be separated from nearby ideas. Sincerity means a person believes what they say, not that what they say is correct. Consensus means people agree, and entire societies can agree about something false. Certainty describes confidence, which can be misplaced. Justification concerns reasons, and excellent reasons can occasionally lead to error. Perspective complicates descriptions without dissolving facts. Two witnesses can see different sides of the same event. Their perspectives may explain why each notices something different. It does not follow that every incompatible account becomes true. Personal experience is authoritative about some things, uncertain about others, and never a magical shield around factual claims. Truth matters precisely because belief, evidence, and agreement can separate from it. A true statement may remain unnoticed for centuries. A false one may be universally accepted. The rain does not wait for consensus before touching the street. Yet one of your most fundamental beliefs concerns something you never observe directly. You believe other people do not merely move and speak. You believe there is experience behind their eyes. If truth is independent of what you can personally access, few truths demonstrate that distance more clearly. Someone touches a hot pan, pulls back, and cries out. You see the movement, hear the voice, and notice the expression. You do not feel their pain. Their experience never travels across the room into your awareness. Everything directly available to you is behavior, body, and language. The pain itself belongs to a point of view you cannot enter. The problem of other minds begins with an asymmetry. Your own thoughts and sensations are present from within. Other minds appear through outward signs. How do those signs justify believing that another inner world exists? An argument from analogy says that other people resemble you. When your finger burns, pain produces withdrawal, expression, and speech. When another body behaves similarly under similar conditions, the natural inference is a similar cause. The weakness is that the sample begins with only one mind known directly, your own. The strength is the enormous detail of the resemblance. Other people do not merely react. They learn, improvise, misunderstand, conceal, surprise, and describe experiences with structures that match your own. Inference to the best explanation broadens the case. Minds explain flexible behavior, conversation, planning, humor, and cooperation more powerfully than the hypothesis that everyone else is an empty automaton. The existence of other minds makes the social world intelligible with extraordinary economy. Some philosophers challenge the idea that pain is completely hidden behind behavior. You may directly see grief in a face or hear hesitation in a voice, not infer an invisible object through a chain of reasoning. Expression is part of how mental life exists publicly. This does not make minds transparent. People can act, lie, suppress, and be misunderstood. It means inner and outer may not be as separate as the skeptical picture assumes. A philosophical zombie makes the doubt sharper. Imagine a being physically and behaviorally identical to you, but containing no experience. It laughs, reports pain, and discusses consciousness while nothing is felt. If such a being is genuinely possible, behavior may not logically guarantee consciousness. But conceiving a zombie in a thought experiment does not provide evidence that your neighbor is one. The scenario tests theories of mind, not the humanity of strangers. Trust in testimony also matters. Much of what you know comes from other people reporting what they saw, remembered, wanted, or felt. If every report required independent proof of a mind before it could count, human knowledge would barely begin. Treating others as minded is not a decorative assumption added after observation. It is part of the framework in which language and evidence operate. Absolute proof may be unavailable because another perspective, by definition, is not yours. Yet the alternative requires a world filled with bodies performing the complete structure of life for no one. Other minds remain the best explanation, the basis of relationship, and perhaps something perceived in expression before philosophy arrives to doubt it. The inaccessible mind across the room is mysterious, but the mind closest to you presents another problem. It changes beliefs, replaces cells, loses memories, and becomes almost unrecognizable across decades. Why do all those different moments still belong to one person? You enter a teleporter that records every detail of your body, destroys it, and reconstructs an exact version on Mars. The person who opens their eyes remembers entering the machine. They recognize your friends, continue your plans, and insist the journey worked. From the outside, nothing appears lost. But did you arrive, or did you die while a perfect successor inherited your confidence? Personal identity asks what makes a person at one time numerically the same person at another, not merely similar. Your appearance, personality, values, and memories can change, while ordinary language continues to use one name. The bodily view says you persist because the same living human organism continues. The body does not need to retain every molecule. A river remains one river while its water moves, and an organism maintains continuity through gradual change. This handles sleep and memory loss naturally, but becomes difficult when imagined brain transplants separate the organism from the psychology everyone recognizes as you. A brain-based account places identity in the organs sustaining mental life. If your functioning brain were moved into another body, many people expect you to awaken where the brain goes. Yet how much brain is required, and why should this tissue matter apart from the psychological processes it preserves? Psychological continuity focuses on overlapping chains of memory, intention, character, and belief. The adult remembers the adolescent, who remembered the child. No single trait must remain unchanged. The life holds together through connected mental stages. But memory cannot do all the work. False memories can be implanted, and genuine memory may already assume that the rememberer is the person who lived the event. Duplication creates the sharpest problem. Suppose the teleporter produces two perfect copies. Both possess the same memories and equal psychological continuity with you. They cannot both be numerically identical to each other, because they immediately occupy different places and begin different lives. If identity cannot branch while continuity can, perhaps continuity is what matters for survival, even when strict identity has no answer. An immaterial soul offers a simple carrier. The same subject remains through physical and mental change. Its difficulty is evidence and recognition. If the soul has no observable features, how could anyone establish that the soul waking tomorrow is the one present today rather than an indistinguishable replacement? Reductionist views suggest there may be no additional hidden fact. A person consists of physical and psychological connections, and demanding a deeper identity beyond them may create a question with no further answer. The teleporter frightens us because ordinary survival never forces these connections apart. In daily life, identity remains practical before it becomes metaphysical. Promises, responsibility, relationships, and anticipation depend on connecting one moment to another. You care about tomorrow's person because tomorrow is joined to you in the right ways. Those connections extend across something else we rarely define while using it constantly. Time. Think of a future birthday. At this moment it seems not to exist. Eventually it will become present for one day, then move into the past, where it can no longer be changed. This sounds ordinary until you ask what moved. Did the birthday travel toward you? Did a spotlight called the present cross a fixed landscape? Or did nothing move except clocks, bodies, and the contents of awareness? No one doubts that events have temporal relations. Seeds precede trees. Words occur in an order. Clocks compare intervals. The deeper disagreement concerns which moments exist and whether the passage you feel belongs to reality itself. Presentism says only the present exists. The past existed and the future will exist, but neither is real now. This fits the powerful sense that the present is special and the future genuinely open. Its challenge is explaining truths about absent times. What makes it true that an eclipse occurred centuries ago if no past event exists? Eternalism treats past, present, and future as different locations in a four-dimensional spacetime. Your childhood and old age do not exist now in the same place, but may be equally parts of the total structure. Nothing objectively comes into existence and disappears. Conscious beings encounter events along their paths and experience one local moment at a time. The growing block view offers a middle position. The past and present exist, while the future does not yet. Reality accumulates new events. But if earlier moments remain real, why should the latest edge alone possess the property of being present? And how could someone inside an earlier moment know that it was no longer the edge? Relativity complicates the idea of a universal now. Observers moving differently can disagree about whether distant events are simultaneous without either being mistaken. This fits naturally with a space-time block, but physics does not simply announce a final metaphysics. The felt passage of time, the existence of moments, and the structure described by equations are related questions, not identical ones. Psychological time creates another layer. Fear can stretch seconds. Routine can compress months in memory. These changes do not alter clock time, yet they are genuine features of lived time. The mind builds duration from attention, change, memory, and anticipation. Perhaps passage is fundamental. Perhaps it is the way memory-bearing creatures experience an ordered universe in which records point one direction. Either way, time is not dismissed by calling it an illusion. An illusion still occurs, changes, and appears to pass. The question matters because a real future may be more than an empty place waiting to be created. If eternalism is true, tomorrow might occupy space-time as firmly as yesterday. That leads to a disturbing thought. If the future already exists, is it already fixed? Imagine receiving a book that describes tomorrow with perfect accuracy. It says you will drink coffee at 8. You decide to disprove it by choosing tea. Then you turn the page and read, "After attempting to resist this book, you will choose tea." Whatever you plan appears already in the text. Is the book controlling you, or merely recording the decision you will freely make? Several different ideas hide inside the word fixed. Determinism says the complete past, together with the laws of nature, permits only one future. Predictability concerns whether anyone can calculate that future. A system can be deterministic and still impossible to predict because of complexity or sensitivity to tiny unknown details. Fatalism says an outcome will happen no matter what you do. That is stronger and stranger. Suppose it is already true that you will drink tea tomorrow. If you drank coffee instead, the earlier statement would have been false. Does its truth now remove your ability to act differently? One reply says, truth does not cause the event. The statement is true because of what you will choose. Your action is not powerless beside the future. It is part of what makes that future the one correctly described. Foreknowledge creates a similar tension. An infallible observer knows what you will do. The knowledge cannot be wrong, yet knowing is not forcing. Seeing someone sit does not cause them to sit. The complication is temporal. If the knowledge was infallibly settled long before your decision, the alternative seems unavailable even if no force is applied. Some theories preserve an open future by holding that genuinely contingent statements about it are not yet true or false. There are possibilities rather than one completed set of future facts. Others say many possible futures exist, while only one becomes actual through causes and choices. Eternalists can respond that a future event's existence does not remove agency any more than a past choice's existence removes the fact that it was made for reasons. The book experiment hides its own trap. To predict you perfectly, it must include how you react to reading the prediction. The information becomes a new cause inside the system it describes. A prediction about a person who never sees it is easier than one handed to a person determined to resist. Whether the future is metaphysically open, practically unpredictable, or already part of space-time, your deliberation remains one of the processes by which it occurs. The phrase "it will happen" does not mean it will happen regardless of what you do. Sometimes it will happen because of what you do. Still, if past and future possess any kind of reality, a more literal temptation appears. Could a person move through time differently, not merely waiting for tomorrow, but reaching it, or even returning to yesterday? You board a spacecraft, accelerate to an enormous speed, and return after what feels like 5 years. On Earth, decades have passed. Friends have aged, cities have changed, and calendars display a future you reached without experiencing all the years between. Your clock never ran backward. It simply traced a shorter amount of time through space-time than the clocks left behind. This kind of travel to the future is not science fiction. Relativity predicts time dilation, and precise clocks confirm it. Speed and gravity affect elapsed time. The dramatic journey remains beyond ordinary technology, but the physical principle is established. Travel to the past is different. Some solutions in general relativity contain closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that return to an earlier event. Proposed routes involve extreme rotation, wormholes, or other conditions far beyond anything we can engineer, and perhaps beyond anything physically possible. A mathematical solution is not a working machine. The grandfather paradox reveals the logical pressure. You return to a time before your parent was born and prevent the meeting that led to your existence. If you never existed, no one made the journey. If no one made the journey, the meeting occurs and you exist. The story appears to demand both outcomes. One response requires self-consistency. You can visit the past, but you cannot make history contradictory. Every action you take was always part of that history. The weapon fails, you change your mind, or your interference causes the meeting you hope to prevent. This can feel like fate, though locally you still act for ordinary reasons. The universe simply contains no inconsistent sequence. Another response allows branching histories. Your arrival creates or enters a different timeline. You can alter that branch without erasing the past from which you departed. This avoids contradiction, but changes what returning means. You do not repair your own history. You produce another one. The bootstrap paradox needs no murdered ancestor. Imagine receiving a design from your future self, building the machine, then carrying the same design into the past and giving it to your younger self. The information exists in a loop with no moment of invention. Nothing is logically contradictory, yet explanation seems to circle without an origin. Physics may prevent these situations through constraints we do not yet fully understand. Quantum effects might destabilize a wormhole. Required forms of matter may not exist in usable quantities. Some have proposed chronology protection, the idea that nature blocks macroscopic travel to the past. No experiment has shown that people can do it. Time travel therefore divides into an established effect, reaching the future at unequal rates, and a speculative possibility, returning to the past through exotic geometry. The first changes how much time you experience. The second threatens how causes are ordered. But behind many fantasies of time, travel lies a quieter desire. We want to revisit what was lost, speak again, correct 1 hour, or cross the boundary no traveler has returned to describe. That boundary is not merely the past, it is death. Imagine that a perfect reconstruction of you awakens 100 years after your death. It has your memories, voice, habits, private jokes, and the unfinished thought you were having at the end. Everyone accepts it as your return. The question is not whether the reconstruction resembles you. The question is whether the experience occurring behind your eyes now would ever open behind its eyes. Philosophy cannot observe a person's post-mortem experience from the outside. It can clarify what would need to continue for survival to mean more than replacement. Dualism offers the most familiar possibility. If the conscious subject is an immaterial soul rather than identical to the brain, the soul might continue when the body stops. This preserves a carrier of identity, but leaves the relationship mysterious. Why do anesthesia, injury, disease, and brain development alter thought so reliably if the thinking subject can exist independently? Traditions of resurrection often preserve the person through divine action. A body may be restored or transformed after death. The philosophical challenge is continuity. If entirely new matter is assembled, what makes the result the original person rather than a perfect copy? An appeal to divine knowledge may answer how reconstruction is accurate while still leaving the nature of identity to explain. Reincarnation proposes continuity across different lives, but traditions disagree about what travels. A soul, consciousness, moral consequence, or causal stream may continue, sometimes without autobiographical memory. If no memory, personality, or body remains, survival may differ sharply from the everyday hope that this present person will awaken again. Materialism ties mental life to functioning physical systems. If consciousness depends entirely on brain activity, irreversible destruction of that activity ends the person. Future reconstruction might create continuity of information while failing to resume the original point of view, just as the teleporter may create a successor. Near-death experiences are genuine experiences reported by people who came close to death or were revived after a medical crisis. They can include light, separation from the body, peace, presence, or panoramic memory. Their importance to the person is not in doubt. Their interpretation remains disputed. An experience occurring near death under unusual brain and bodily conditions is not automatically evidence of consciousness continuing after irreversible death. Science can examine brains, reports, resuscitation, and the limits of measurement. It cannot simply test every metaphysical possibility of survival. Religion and philosophy can offer models that science has not established and may not be able to exclude universally. The careful answer is therefore narrower than the hope or fear surrounding it. We do not know through shared public evidence that personal consciousness continues after death. Different views of what a person is make different forms of survival coherent. Yet before deciding whether death leads somewhere, another question waits. If it leads nowhere, is that nothingness itself bad for the person who dies? Before you were born, centuries passed without you. You did not wait in darkness or feel deprived of mornings you could not see. Non-existence before life causes little fear. Non-existence after life can feel completely different, although both seem to contain the same absence. Epicurus argued that death is nothing to us. While we exist, death is not present. When death is present, we no longer exist. There is no subject remaining to experience the condition as painful, lonely, or empty. On this view, imagining yourself trapped inside non-existence is a mistake. There is no inside. The symmetry argument adds that if the eternity before birth was not terrible, the eternity after death should not be terrible merely because it lies in another direction. Yet, psychology is asymmetric for a reason. The future contains projects, relationships, and anticipated experiences. The past before birth contains no interrupted plans. This leads to the deprivation account. Death can be bad not because being dead feels bad, but because death removes goods a person would otherwise have had. Missing a future friendship or ordinary mourning can be a loss, even if the loss is never experienced. A cancelled journey can deprive someone without creating a separate sensation called deprivation. The account creates a timing puzzle. When does death harm the person? Before death, the lost future has not yet been lost. After death, the person may no longer exist. One response says the harm is comparative rather than located like an injury. The person's life is worse than the longer life they could reasonably have lived. Interests provide another route. People form commitments and desires extending beyond the present. Death can frustrate them, just as events occurring after someone's death can defeat a project they cared about. Whether a person must exist at the same moment as every harm remains disputed. None of this implies that endless life would be automatically better. An immortal person might change until little connects later existence to the original self. Repetition could erode desire, while infinite time could remove the urgency that gives projects shape. The alternative to premature death is not necessarily an eternity without cost. Death can devastate survivors, end agency, and deprive a life of possibilities without becoming an experience endured by the dead. These claims are compatible. They simply locate the badness in different places. Finitude may be one of the reasons the question of meaning becomes urgent. A limited life cannot contain every path. Choices exclude possibilities. Projects can remain unfinished, and ordinary moments become unrepeatable. Does that limitation destroy meaning, or is it part of what allows anything to matter? Imagine reaching every goal written by your younger self. The work is finished, the room is quiet, and the achievements are real. Yet beneath the satisfaction, a question remains. Why did any of it matter? Meaning is not identical to pleasure, success, morality, or happiness. A difficult life can feel deeply meaningful, while a comfortable one can feel empty. Supernaturalist answers connect meaning to something beyond ordinary human life. A creator may assign a purpose, an immortal soul may participate in an eternal story, or a life may matter through relationship with the divine. This provides meaning that does not disappear when individual preference changes. Its difficulty is dependence. If the supernatural framework is false or unknowable, does meaning collapse with it? And if a purpose is assigned from above, why does assignment make the purpose valuable rather than merely compulsory? Subjectivist theories locate meaning in commitments a person genuinely embraces. A project matters because it organizes attention, effort, identity, and care. There is no single task every human must perform. The problem appears when devotion attaches to something empty or destructive. Imagine someone who sincerely loves counting every blade of grass in an enormous field, then beginning again forever. The activity gives structure and satisfaction. Is passion enough? Many people feel that the object of devotion must also possess value. Objectivist theories propose that some pursuits can be meaningful independently of personal enthusiasm. Knowledge, creation, love, moral achievement, understanding, or contribution to something larger than the self. But a life forced into objectively valuable work without any identification may feel alien rather than meaningful. Hybrid theories combine both sides. Meaning arises when subjective attraction meets an object worthy of attraction. You care, and what you care about deserves care. The challenge is explaining objective worth without quietly borrowing a full moral theory. Nihilism concludes that no life satisfies the conditions required for genuine meaning, especially cosmic meaning. Absurdism notices a related tension. Human beings demand an answer from a universe that may offer silence. The response is not necessarily despair. It can be recognition that the demand and the silence coexist. Cosmic purpose and meaning within a life are different questions. A song need not be written by the universe to matter within an evening. Local meaning can be real even if galaxies remain indifferent. Conversely, believing in a cosmic plan does not automatically reveal the role of one particular life. Meaning is therefore less like a substance hidden inside events and more like a relationship among a life, its concerns, and what may be worth concerning oneself with. But a meaningful life can still be lived badly. Purpose tells us why something matters. It does not yet tell us what is right. Imagine a society in which every citizen approves of an act you consider cruel. Its laws require the act, its traditions praise it, and no public voice objects. Does unanimous approval make the act right, or can an entire society be morally mistaken? Moral realism says at least some moral claims are true independently of anyone's approval. If cruelty for amusement is wrong, a vote cannot reverse it. Naturalist versions ground moral facts in features such as suffering, flourishing, needs, or the conditions of social life. Non-naturalists hold that moral properties are real, but cannot be reduced completely to scientific descriptions. The difficulty is explaining how moral facts fit into the world and how we detect them. A microscope can reveal a cell, but not the wrongness of causing needless pain. Reason, emotion, experience, and social learning all influence moral judgment, and each can be distorted. Constructivism offers another form of objectivity. Moral principles may be those that rational agents would accept under fair conditions without knowing which position they themselves would occupy. The standard is not a mysterious object in nature, but neither is it whatever one person happens to prefer. Relativism makes moral truth dependent on a cultural or conceptual framework. It explains why norms differ and why judgment can be embedded in forms of life. Yet it struggles with reformers. If a society's standards define correctness, someone opposing an accepted injustice seems mistaken until the majority changes. Error theory agrees that moral language attempts to describe objective facts, then argues that no such facts exist. Expressivism interprets moral statements differently. Saying cruelty is wrong may express condemnation, commitment, or a demand, rather than report an ordinary property. Religion adds the Euthyphro question. Is an action good because God commands it, or does God command it because it is good? The first option can make morality seem arbitrary. The second appears to place a standard of goodness beyond command. Sophisticated religious theories offer responses, but the dilemma shows that invoking God does not end the work of explaining goodness. Disagreement proves little by itself. People disagree about astronomy without making planets subjective. Agreement also proves little. Crowds can share errors. The question is, what best explains the seriousness with which moral claims reach beyond preference? Even if moral truths exist, they may conflict in practice. Protect life, tell the truth, respect autonomy, keep promises, reduce suffering. A situation can make it impossible to honor all of them. Then, morality becomes not a search for facts alone, but a decision about what may be done to achieve a good result. A runaway trolley is approaching 5 people. You can pull a lever that diverts it onto another track where it will kill one. Doing nothing preserves your innocence as a spectator only in appearance. You know the result and possess the power to alter it. Is causing one death the right way to prevent 5? Consequentialism evaluates choices by their outcomes. In its most familiar form, each person's welfare matters impartially, so saving 5 at the cost of 1 appears justified. More sophisticated versions ask whether we should assess individual acts or follow rules whose general adoption produces better results. Consequences also include uncertainty, trust, precedent, and effects beyond the visible moment. Deontological theories argue that some actions are forbidden or required because people possess rights and must not be used merely as tools. This becomes vivid when the case changes. You stand on a bridge above the trolley beside a large stranger. Pushing him would stop it and save 5. The numbers remain the same, but many people who would pull the lever refuse to push. The difference may concern intention. In the Lever case, the person's death is foreseen as a side effect of diverting danger. On the bridge, the body is used as the means of stopping the trolley. The doctrine of double effect treats that distinction as morally important under certain conditions. Critics ask whether intention can bear so much weight when the outcome is knowingly produced. A surgeon case presses harder. 5 patients need different organs. A healthy visitor could be killed to save them. Pure arithmetic appears to favor the killing, yet a medical system permitting it would destroy trust and expose everyone to danger. Rule consequentialism can oppose the act because the general rule has disastrous effects, while deontology opposes using the visitor regardless of the total. Virtue ethics shifts attention from formula to practical wisdom. What would a just, courageous, compassionate person perceive in this particular situation? This avoids treating morality as a machine, but risks sounding vague when virtues conflict. The ends, therefore, sometimes justify means, but that sentence hides nearly everything important. Which ends? Whose welfare? What rights? What uncertainty? What alternatives? And what happens when the rule becomes public? The trolley is not a personality test. It is a clean room, built to expose principles that real life mixes together. Those principles assume something about the creatures expected to follow them. Are humans naturally cooperative beings corrupted by circumstances, selfish beings restrained by rules, or both depending on the world around them? During a power failure, every camera in a station goes dark. On an empty bench, you find a wallet filled with money and identification. No one saw you pick it up. Returning it may reveal goodness, training, concern for reputation inside your own mind, or simply the person you happen to be in that moment. Calling humans naturally good or evil compresses many capacities into one label. People care for children, cooperate with strangers, punish cheaters, favor their own groups, compete for status, and inflict cruelty. These tendencies can coexist in the same person. Hobbes imagined life without a common authority as dangerously insecure. People are roughly equal in their ability to threaten one another, resources can be scarce, and uncertainty encourages preemptive aggression. The result is not that everyone loves violence. Fear, competition, and distrust can make conflict rational, even among people who would prefer peace. Institutions restrain the conditions producing war. Rousseau offered a contrasting picture. Human beings outside corrupting social comparison possess self-preservation and pity, while inequality, dependence, and the desire for status transform relationships. This is not simply the claim that every infant is morally perfect. It suggests that certain forms of society cultivate vanity and domination. Aristotle viewed humans as political animals whose capacities develop within community. Language, judgment, friendship, and virtue are not complete before society. Asking whether an isolated human is good may be like asking whether an isolated note is harmonious. Evolutionary accounts help explain cooperation without pretending organisms consciously calculate genetics. Care for relatives, reciprocal help, reputation, group coordination, and punishment of exploitation can become stable under different conditions. Aggression can also be advantageous under others. Explaining the origin of a behavior does not make it morally right. The ring of Gyges removes reputation entirely. Its wearer becomes invisible and can act without punishment. Would morality survive? Some people behave well because surveillance shapes behavior. Others have internalized values, care about victims, or refuse to become the kind of person an invisible crime would create. Human nature may be less a verdict than a range. Circumstances select, reward, and amplify different possibilities. A compassionate person can be frightened into exclusion. A competitive person can cooperate within a trusted system. Institutions matter because character is neither infinitely flexible nor mechanically fixed. The wallet does not reveal the essence of a species. It reveals one action produced by temperament, history, incentives, empathy, and choice. Whatever humans naturally are, a life can cultivate some capacities more than others. That returns us from the species to the individual. What kind of cultivation would make one life go well? You are offered a machine capable of producing a lifetime of perfect experience. Once connected, you will believe you are loving people, creating work, traveling, learning, and succeeding. Every pleasure will feel real. You will forget the machine exists. Would you enter forever? If well-being consists only of pleasant experience, entering seems reasonable. Hedonism says what ultimately benefits a person is pleasure and the absence of pain. Everything else matters through its effect on experience. The theory explains why a life filled with misery appears bad even when it looks impressive from outside. Refusing the machine suggests that many people value more than feeling. They want to do things, not merely experience doing them. They want relationships with independent people, contact with reality, and the opportunity to become someone through actual choices. Still, one intuition about a strange machine does not settle every form of hedonism. Fear of technology, attachment to present relationships, and uncertainty can influence the refusal. Desire satisfaction theories say a life goes better when a person's relevant desires are fulfilled. This respects individual difference. One person wants knowledge, another family, another adventure. But desires can be based on false information, manipulated, self-destructive, or reduced by oppression. Someone taught never to expect freedom may report few frustrated desires. Objective list theories propose goods that benefit people whether or not they currently desire them: friendship, knowledge, achievement, autonomy, health, or meaningful activity. The challenge is explaining who writes the list and why one set of goods applies across very different lives. Aristotelian eudaimonia is often translated as happiness, but it means something closer to flourishing. A good life involves exercising human capacities well, especially reason and virtue, across a complete life. A pleasant afternoon is not enough, and one terrible afternoon need not erase everything. The whole pattern matters. Well-being differs from morality and meaning. A sacrifice may be morally admirable while making the person's life worse. A demanding project may be meaningful while containing little pleasure. A comfortable life may go well for someone without changing history. Each theory captures a familiar truth. Feeling matters. Getting what you care about matters. Reality, relationship, agency, and development seem to matter too. A good life may not reduce to one ingredient because lives are structures, not containers filled with a single substance. Among the things people value without needing them to be useful is beauty. It can interrupt an ordinary life for no practical reason, which makes it a fitting final question. When something appears beautiful, is that value in the thing, in you, or somewhere in the meeting between them? Two people stand before the same landscape at sunset. One becomes silent, noticing the cold color near the horizon and the last light on the hills. The other feels nothing and checks the time. The landscape has not changed between their eyes. Did beauty appear for one person, remain hidden from the other, or exist nowhere except in the response? Objectivist views place beauty partly in the object: proportion, unity, complexity, harmony, expressive form, or an arrangement that rewards attention. This explains why people discuss beauty as though they can misunderstand, or discover something. A symphony may reveal structure to an experienced listener that a distracted listener never hears. Subjectivism begins with dependence on response. Beauty is not visible as a physical ingredient beside color and shape. It involves pleasure, feeling, or a distinctive experience in an observer. Without creatures capable of aesthetic response, perhaps mountains would possess forms, but not beauty. Pure preference, however, seems too simple. Taste can develop. Attention changes what becomes available. Familiarity, comparison, historical knowledge, and freedom from prejudice can improve judgment. This supports an intersubjective view. Beauty may depend on human sensibility while permitting standards among observers. Color also depends on perceptual systems, yet not every color judgment is equally accurate. Aesthetic judgment could involve trained capacities without becoming measurement by one universal formula. Kant described judgments of beauty as rooted in subjective pleasure while reaching toward shared validity. When you call something beautiful, you do more than report that you personally enjoy it. You speak as though others ought to be able to see it, even though no proof can force the response. He also distinguished disinterested appreciation from wanting to own, consume, or use the object. Culture, biology, memory, and convention all shape taste. Symmetry may attract attention, familiarity can produce comfort, and shared traditions teach people what to notice. These explanations do not automatically reduce beauty to any one mechanism. Knowing why music moves a nervous system does not make the movement unreal. Perhaps beauty is neither a label sitting entirely on the landscape nor a private invention sealed inside the viewer. It may be a possibility realized when certain forms meet certain kinds of attention. The second person at the sunset may not be wrong. The first may not be projecting something meaningless. They are participating differently in what the scene allows. The question changes the act of looking even without an answer. The hills remain where they were. The light continues fading. But attention stays a little longer, and an ordinary world becomes available in greater detail. These questions do not become smaller because they remain unresolved. Each one reveals a boundary between explanation and brute fact, behavior and experience, choice and cause, perception and reality, one moment and the next, a life and whatever may follow it. Philosophy begins where an ordinary word such as real, free, true, good, or beautiful stops feeling ordinary. You do not need to settle every question tonight. It is enough to notice how many silent assumptions hold a familiar world together. The room can remain the same while the questions soften around it, leaving the mind with fewer conclusions, perhaps, but a clearer view of the mystery it was already living inside.